because they're learning one perek a day. It's a time where we can all take chizuk to be mechazek in our limud HaRambam, each person in their own way. For some it might be being moisif in eichus, in the quality of their learning, to learn halacha b'yun, as the Rebbe said. For some of us it might be starting to learn Rambam. For others it might be to upgrade from learning Sefer HaMitzvahs to one perek a day, or one perek to 3 prakim a day. But the ikar is, this is a hayrah from the Rebbe, and therefore by us as chassidim should be something very tiresome, something very precious to us, and something we should certainly be moisif on, and certainly something which is worth celebrating. The Rebbe had haskamas, and not the Rebbe needs haskamas, but there was support from Gideon Yisrael for the limud HaRambam. And if that's true, that in the wider world, as we see in Eretz Yisrael today, a resurgence, particularly amongst the Mizrahi Yeshivas, a big movement for learning Rambam according to the Seder of the Rebbe. So how much more so we as Chassidim, we should be at the forefront of the campaign of limud HaRambam, starting for ourselves, and then inspiring one another in doing the same. So we'll now show these 2 excerpts from the final, from the Siyum, the very first Siyum of limud HaRambam, Tavshin Mehmei.
1984, the Rebbe launched a worldwide daily study program of Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law, the Mishnah Torah. At the first completion ceremony a year later, the Rebbe taught and expounded Maimonides' concluding law, first of a 2-part series.
The Siyum, the Halacha Achreina Eitzachon, und the Eise HaZman, wo das kommt beherrscht zu der Friedeke Halacha. Also das Zman, wo das Yemes HaMashiach, LeYiyeshom, LeYirov, LeMilchom, nicht in Hunger und nicht in Milchomet. LeKina Besachlus, wird mit sein Kino und Strachlus zwischen sich. Der Fall, was Chol HaMa'adani, der alle in Yonim Shel Teva, a Fibor to be, was sie seinen Schlemus in Teva, a sie seinen Ne'ad in dem Oder, wo das der Verloschen Teimu, wo das nicht stammt Teva, nur a Teva, was bricht zu Teimu, wenn wir sein Mitsuin geoffen. Was sagt damit an Mitsuin Stamm, oder Mitsuin mit einander Teer, nur dachte mit dem Teer Mitsuin geoffen, wo der Linie von Opfer ist, in der Weg der Sechet von Ilchus, Pesach und Bier Chometz. Aber man sagt, dass sein Bottel gehabt in die Jahre, als Opfer ist verbunden mit der Linie, als verwendet im Ganzen nicht genau. Dass Madani, muss dazu ankommen, der soll sein betätigt, man soll nicht haben keine in Jönem an der Walduli, wie Schleimus in Kol Kechis an Nefeschelei. Kann lernen, Teile, wie sie darf zu sein, bis Beschleimus, aber der Chivus von der Madani mit Sadasmo ist derselbe Chivus wie Opfer. Noch sagt hier ist Kol Elam, aber das es Hawaii Bilwar, mit also kommen, Agid, also sein Nivresi, der Schamische Schemi, was bis Mama sagt, dann kommt sein der chemische Schemi, wie auch das mit dem Shulchan Aruch, als kommen nicht nur der noch im Shulchan Aruch, als kommen Masechel Lidei Shamai, Lishem Shamai, und bechol Drachecho Darehu, der hat Goshtadru, bechol Drachecho, und kol Masechel, wie der Rambam schreibt in Ilches Deis, aber Chochom ist nicht, nichts wie Limude, nicht nur wie Limude, nur Reba, Achilossi, und Bishsiyossi, und Beteyuli, und Masol, und Matone, ist der Reiche Knicker, was wird getan durch Alemis und Chochom. Wo das in der Eise Koelom, das als Mann wird sein Eise Koelom, das es Hawaii Bilwar. Konnte der Rambam Schäler sein. Zum allen Menschen darf man Schäler sein, dem Seder, was sie gewähren bis dann. Was bis dann Punkt wird viel Schäler gewähren in den Joni Oelom. Lob und Milchom und Kinder bis Sachrus. Konnte Rechet Schäler sein, noch eine tiefere Sache. Aber viele Asami sagen, was bis dann und in so gewähren Eise Koelom al Piatero. wird mit dem Schädel sein, oder dem Esikatelo, und durch der Rambam mäßig noch mehr, aber dass nicht nur von ihnen, nur dass Esikoelen, der ganze Mina mit Dabe, mit dem sein in Asami Mami du Matze, wenn was wird mir so riesig sein, it mein Schädel sein. Drei hier Esikolen, Elam in Kamillionen, was sie gewähren, bis dem und Elam, mehr nicht wie in einem Tisch von sie. Was ist das, hat die Teile, das ist Hawaii Bilwar. Noch mehr schlimmer in der Linie von, aber es wird nicht stammen, das ist Hawaii, nur es auch noch in der Bilwar. Und da ist der Heiche der Dirk. Sie können so sein, das ist Hawaii, zu lieber zweite Kavono, Teile, Alpia Teile, bis a fila Kavono, von dem und der Teile, כדי לדעת המייסה אשר יעשו ואלה אשר להתיישם. בשעשר זאת לדעת הוואי בלבד, tut דרוף העניין נפלא. הדמות לדעת מניתון קומץ zu dem לימוד התורה, כדי לדעת המייסה אשר יעשו ואלה אשר להתיישם, der Paulus hat das Rotmen durch הלימוד, wie bald der Dämmut wird mit Wanken Schicher, wird man lernen einmal, wird es als sie bleiben, Lade, Lili, Lomi, bis es lernen, bekisse der Halachis. Heute kann das Messiah sein, der Nesher Zman, Kotze, Beise, und noch mehr, wenn kommt der Mai, und in Druck in die Scheiche der Linien und der Loschen von Esig. Und das ist der Kirche der Loschen HaRambam, ist bedient. Nicht sagt, Leches Leben oder Avedes Leben oder Kajese Basel, nur Dabke der Loschen Esig. Und das ist verbunden mit Esig, mit zweiten Abteil von Esig, Ainischer Mischer, was Ainischer Esig ist, selbst wie Sovi. Sie kommen gar nicht zu, nicht wie Esig von den Linien allein, es hat verdammt, ist da Grieche, dass nicht in Ainischer Esig. Ainischer Esig ist, dass muss zukommen. Und das ist der Linie in Teira Asmo, also sein der Yagdi, Teira wie Yagdi. Madach ist Mann von Gold. Ich dode Messias von Limut, Kola, Teira, Kula, wie die Gmorde sagt im Nachricht. Al der sehr echt in Plota-Aloch ist ein Limut. Kedela das ist ein Aloch. Und ein größerer Limut, der soll sein der Yagdi, Teira wie Yagdi, ist da echt mäßig. Aber damit wird sein der Limut in meinem Leben Bilwad, nicht zu Limut, das ist allein. Und der Pfarrer sagt, der Rechet und der Viecher, wie bald hat der Limut erzählt, was ich auch Masken und die Masken von ihm, wird sein nicht nur ein Limut, das ist ein Loch, das weiß ich. Nur lernt das Limut erzählt, wie Schmor, weil Leche sein ihm nicht Stamm Chachomim, am Chochom und Novis. Und sie haben die Idee, Chochma Satero, nur sie werden sein Chachomim Gdeili.
Maimonides concludes his code of Jewish law, the Mishnah Torah. In the era of Mashiach,
the final chapters of Maimonides' Code of Jewish Law, the Mishnah Torah, offer a halachic description of the Messianic age.
knowing the hidden matters and grasping their Creator. The full extent possible for man, as it is written, for the knowledge of God will fill the earth as water covers the sea. Second of a two-part series.
Was in die Unionen Stumi, das in der Soßen, in Nellen, mit Kohlereien, das in der Ingen von der Ebenste. Was wie von der Wesen in der Ebensten war das, es Hawaii, bleibt noch Halt mit Zaderu, mit der Rambam schreibt in Tchilas-Zifre, aber das ist Lebe Erech, al Mietze, dann Juni, der Eschwe. Sagt der Ebenste, wie viel Wesen bleibt noch Halt, worden zu ihm, wenn darf noch Halt zu worden. Und das muss sein Hoffen und Geduld und sein Gideon, das zu wissen, echt worden als tun. Und in Rufe sich nicht maßlich. Wie bald das bekommt, ein Gideon worden als tun, kann bei sich trachten, bis damit das Gewehr nach Dover als Soßen begangen. Bischass bekommt in Rufe ein Gideon, a viele, dass nicht ein Gideon schlimmer. Aber hat schon eine Idee, und da war das so, hat sich umgetan, eine Gewalt. Sie werden da war das so, bis in Mesa Moschiach. Und nie in Mesa Moschiach ist zugekommen, und Ruf, was Eschpech, Ruche, auf Kol Bosse, und kann nicht sehen, was als selber kommen eine Idee, und da war das so. Sagt mir, wie bald das heiße Hasma, oder demut nicht maßlich, was jeden Dworim als tun, stand, was darf sein in der Leben von Yasigu. Das heißt, sein Leben mit Idee, als hat den ganzen durchgenommen, die Minen von dem Seichel, von der Idee, aber was in HaRambam, im Sefer Hamado, als der Seichel und der Maskel und der Muskel, oder wie schreibt dort in der Dehe, und der Idee und die Jodua wird das ein und einzige Sache, wird dieselbe Sache, und das wie Yasigu das wird. Denkt ihr auf die Wege in den Messiah, also das noch drüber mäßig, aber Yasigu das wären Krikei Choda, die Wolle Hore, Zeya Savai, Kamal, Bayom, Chassi, und da ist der Kirche, die Halle Brote, als wir großen Tarnenzer verlernten Sachen mit der Savai, wer sagt früher Yasigu das Beeren, und in Großparamefen verlernten sich die Molle der Savai. Und beschaß mir sagt, Molle bleibt nicht in Not, was den anderen sagt. Sie nicht dort kein Mäßig, in Lernensmann, mehr nicht wie der Savai. Noch sagt und Mäßig noch an ihn, aber das wird Kamayim Vayom Mechassin, die Meduber Amolchen Baruch. Aber beschaß mit Gita Kuk auf den Jam, zet mir nach Kamayim Vayom Mechassin, Apol Pi, was weiß, beschaß meiste, als in Jam, die Kolma, Yesh Biyam, Yesh Biyabosh, Kolma, Yesh Biyabosh, Yesh Biyam, Akut dort gezählte Sachen, Bischaß euch Zetter, wo Zetter in seine Hände Bosse, Zetter mehr nicht wie die Mai. Wollen die Mai sein Bechassen in dem Jahr, den Kalkois-Hayam, den Unterstück von dem Jahr, und Kol HaBruim, wo sie gefinden sich im Jahr. Und wo Zetter mehr nicht wie die Mai. Als jechet mit der Kuchte, mit der Pazar von Elo, beeise Asman, was wird man sehen mehr nicht wie die Mai, wo sie decken zu unter dem indischen Weg. Was seine unter die Mai, die das der Linie von der Savai, wer sagt in dem, was ich hasse mir, ab der Savai, wird das sein, Kamal Vayom Mechassin. Damit ist der Siyum von Hilches Mlochen und Milchamitehen, wo das hat sich der Kescher wie der Mond friert, aber darf maskiv sein. Machen das in meinem Leben schon Teichen, Gummiya, bei Ascholos HaRambam, hebt gleich schon wie der Siyum ist, in der Savai, gleich wie Trulose, Leder schon, Amos Rishni, wo Mamsi Kol Aninza, was Abishas mir lernen das. Nur du, wie man gelernt, Ada Siyum, mit dem Siyum Asli, muss man der sagen, da kommt zu Ahisofo, auf Kamayim Vayom Mechassin. Worden lernt sich das Hichte, nur drüber wird mit Sangwelt im Rambam, wo der Siyum ist, Kaman, la Yom Chasim, der Savai. Wo ich da der Isofer, Bishas selbst Kaman, la Yom Chasim, weiß als sie da Bruim Shibia, nur dann sie werden zugedeckt mit dem Mai. Weiß ich und sagt ich, als sie da Ayam, nur sagt mehr nicht wie Spas Ayam, aber die Karkois Hayam, die Unterstädte und die Bruimsche Biam, sagt er nicht wie die Mai. Der Funk kommt es eine höhere Idee. Aber was lese, leider weiß mehr nicht, dass sie da mehr nicht wie ein Mozui riechen. Worum haben sie Kolan im Zeug? Ist oder der, was ist Mamsi, und nicht Mamsi, was Novel hinzieht. Nur wer sagt weiter, als Simi Bottel, Chas Misholm, sie werden Bottel der Kirch, haben Zoll, wo der Rebische Mamsikol haben im Zoll, oder damit werden sie gleich Bottel. Benele Beschaße selbst Kol haben im Zoll, weiß nicht wie früher, der Savai Kaman, la Yom Chasim, als sie da ja, und der Jam ist zugedeckt mit Mayin, weiß noch mehr. Weiß, dass die ganze Mitzis und Kolan in Zoi, bechol der Reger, ist das der Fall, was in dem Reger gefühlt sich in dem Motzi, in dem Nimsa, gefühlt sich in dem der Motzi, was der Motzi riechen, und Mamsi Kolan in Zoi. Kommt da noch zu, von der Idee, Asawai, Kamayim, Ladom, Chassim, kommt zu einer höheren Idee. Aber ich habe selbst nicht Mayim und nicht im Jam, selbst den Keich, Apel, Benifal, Koloschen, Ayodua, in der von der Maus und der Mittelnerwerben und der Bibel und der Machzelle. Selbst nicht den Mayim und selbst nicht den Jam, selbst den Niglos, Gwede, Hawaii, Ro, Kolbosso, Kipi, Hawaii, Dibe.
I'd like to now call Rabbi Dubi Lisker from Chelum Menachem Lubavitch to make the Siyum on the 37th Matzah of America.
They say one of the reasons why we say Birchas Kayanim on Simchas Torah before, in Shachris, before Kriya, is because by Kriya we read the Zayis HaBracha, the Bracha of Moshe Rabbeinu. And how is it possible that you can have a better bracha than Moshe Rabbeinu, so Birchas Kayanim comes before? We just watched a Siyum on the Rambam from the Rebbe, but here we go. So the Rambam in the last Perek, in the first three halachas, first depict what the world is going to look like when Mashiach comes. Then in the fourth halacha, it tells us why the Chachamim and why why the Gideon always wanted this. And then in the fifth halacha, he goes back to continue, seemingly to continue to describe what it's going to look like when Mashiach comes. Why the interruption? Why doesn't the Rambam give it one flow? So just to give it context, is that the first three halachas, the Rambam talks about the way Mashiach's effect on the world will be in regards to particularly the Yid, and regarding learning Torah and fulfilling mitzvahs on its own. Then the Rambam comes back in the fifth halacha to what's really going to change in the world once Mashiach comes, according to some the second stage, or even within their only stage. So it says, "V'oiseh hazman la'yeh sham le'rav." At that time, there won't be any hunger, no war, no jealousy and competition. His goodness is going to flow in abundance, and all the goodies, luxuries will be found like dust. The only thing that people will be doing, people will be busy with, is to know Hashem, the entire world. not just Yidden. Lefika, and therefore you, Yisrael, Chacham, Gedalim, Yidden will be great and wise sages. V'yodin dvarim hasumim, they will know the hidden things, which means they will know how Hashem, how godliness interacts with the world, and how understanding how within the world there's elikos. V'yasigu das barim kefika adam, they will grasp the mind of the Creator, the undefined Creator, which is beyond the world, according to the ability of man. Shenemar, like it says in the pasuk, Yimala haaretz de'es Hashem, that the world will be filled with the knowledge of God. Hamayim layam mechasim, like water covers the seabed. Now, what's interesting to point out is that it's relevant to nowadays that we find ourselves Yimei Slicha, Yimei Tshuva, that in Hilchis Tshuva Perek Tes, the Rambam over there also describes what takes place when Mashiach will come. And the Rambam over there brings the same pasuk, but over there the Rambam doesn't conclude. He just says Kimal Haaretz De'es Hashem, because the world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, without concluding Kamayim Liyam Mechasim. So how come over here the Rambam feels the necessity to finish the pasuk, and over there the Rambam felt that it was able to be left out? On a simple level, we can answer that the idea of Hamayim Liyam Mechasim, like the Rabbi just explained in the Sikha, is something which isn't necessarily that we can relate to. It's something which is bigger than the person, and that's why it swallows it up. It's overpowering. And therefore, the Rambam, when he's talking about a halacha that's relevant to action, a person wants to do tshuva, they want to know what to fix, how to continue moving forward and serving Hashem. So over there, the Rambam brings what's relevant, and that's the idea that the world's going to be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, which is something that we can relate to in a very real way even now. But over here in Hilchas Malachim and halachas about Mashiach, maybe they're not as relevant. And therefore, the Rambam finishes all the way with Kamayim Le'Machasim, even things which aren't negea, aren't relevant to practical application. However, the problem with this explanation is, as the Rebbe points out, that the Rambam is a sefer of halachas. And every single halacha brought in the sefer has relevance in a practical way, in one way or another. So you can't just say over there the Rambam is talking about what's relevant to halacha, what's relevant to action, and over here the Rambam is not, or it's not as relevant. Because then the Rambam would have written it in the sefer of halachas. And we can understand the idea with prefacing, what the Alter Rebbe explains in Yigaris HaTshuva. In Tshuva there are two types of Tshuva, Tshuva Tshuva Tata, a higher form of Tshuva and a lower form of Tshuva. But simply put, what is Tshuva? The Alter Rebbe says, Tshuva is the person stops doing whatever it is that they were doing to rebel against Hashem. They stop being a particle, they stop being a person without a yoke, the yoke of heaven, or the fear of God. They stop doing what they're not supposed to do. But this can come in two formats. One is realizing that I have an obligation here in this world, I have a purpose here in this world, and therefore it's not befitting for a Yid. This isn't part of my role here in this world, and therefore I can't do it. And in these details, I'm no longer going to continue. The other way, much deeper, is that the reason why I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing, the reason why the person is going to change and all of a sudden have the yoke of heaven, have the fear of God, is because they realize they have an neshama. And the neshama never separated from Hashem at any point, even while it's in the person's body. And therefore they realize that they can connect to Hashem on a much deeper level. And it's not even about the details anymore, about what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. It's in a completely different experience. It's an overwhelming experience. And we know that the Rambam wrote the Sefer, like the Rambam writes in his Agdama, that it's there in order, because of the hardships of Galus, people aren't able to learn as much as they used to. People aren't going to be able to understand Torah the same way. So therefore the Rambam is going to sort of say, do them a favor and lay it out for them. And that's what's so apropos that the Rambam concludes with the halachas and Mashiach, because the Rambam, where there puts it, takes the person on that journey. Starts off with Yisodis, with the fundamentals, the foundations of Yiddishkeit, while the person is still very much connected to the coarseness of the world and the coarseness of themselves. But it's supposed to be a gradual process, the person working on themselves. Every halakha refines the person at another level, another stage. Hilchos Tshuva, which is closer to the beginning of the Sefer, is that the person is only shayach. It's only possible for the person to come to tshuva to the extent of the tshuva, the lower sense of tshuva, the tshuva that I have to change the details. I have to realize this isn't my purpose, and I have another purpose here. And therefore, the Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva doesn't mention Kamayim Le'amachasim because the person's not holding there yet. But when we come to the end of the Rambam, the person's finally holding at the point where Torah, mitzvahs, is no longer just about details. There's a relationship between the Yid and Hashem. It's not just a person fulfilling certain commands, but it's a relationship between the Yid and Hashem, which is much greater than the details of the mitzvah. As we know as the Baal HaRatzin, not the Ratzin itself. Not the will itself, but the one who has the will. And like this we can appreciate what's special about the Rambam. The Rabbi explained many times what's different between the Rambam, the Sefer Rambam, and Shulchan Aruch. Even though they're both laws about how a person should live their life, but the Rambam is not there just to tell you how to live your life. The beauty of the Sefer Rambam is that you have all the halachas, even the halachas which aren't relevant nowadays. Karbonis, Taris, the halachas of Mashiach. And that's because the Rambam in his Akdama, in the beginning of every single Sefer there's a pasuk. The Rambam in his Akdama has a pasuk, Oz lo eivish v'habiti al kol mitzveisecha, which means that I will not be ashamed, I will not be embarrassed, because I've looked into the Torah. Now in the Vilna print, it brings it in the beginning of every Sefer as well. But what's hard to understand about this pasuk is, you can understand if a person doesn't know the halachas of Shabbos, and therefore, God forbid, breaks Shabbos, it's something to be embarrassed about. But if a person doesn't know the halachas of Taris, the halachas of Mashiach, or Chabonis, which isn't relevant necessarily to their day-to-day lives, so what's so embarrassing about that? But the idea is, and the Rambam sets the tone from the Hakdam of the Sefer, and throughout every single Sefer, the point of learning Rambam isn't just about knowing the technical details of how to keep Torah and mitzvahs, but rather the relationship with the Yid and Hashem, and to understand the way Hashem thinks, to know what's going on in Hashem's mind. And then if you're lacking details, if you don't know it, and it's because you didn't learn it, that's somewhat of a busha, that's somewhat of an embarrassment. Anyway, so we should be zaycha to the limud of the Rambam, especially the halachas of Mashiach. We zaycha to Mashiach now, nishmus the hilchis malachim v'achibra kulei, baruch shamar ba'aylam, b'prate, v'chlolei tam nishlam. Shabbat kel b're'el.
Shukmayach and Mazel Tov to all of the Messiah. I'd like to now call up Rabbi Shmuel Leshes, Magid Shirin, Yeshiva Gedola, and the Rav of the Yam Yeshiva to make the Haskalah of the 38th Machzor of Rambam. I was asked to announce that there are seats in the front. Please come forward and take a seat. And wait a few minutes.
Many of you have probably heard of a shliach, a dynamic and energetic shliach who lives in Thailand by the name of Rabbi Nehemiah Willow, who primarily devotes himself to shlichus with people who speak Ivrit, Israelis, and Israeli backpackers. A number of years ago, it was Rosh Hashanah morning. It was still quiet early in the morning, and most people had not yet shown up to the Beis Chabad for davening. And he was sitting and learning Chassidus with a number of backpackers as a hachana, as a preparation to davening. As he was sitting and learning, he felt an urgent tap on his shoulder. And he looks up, he's surprised, and he sees another backpacker who's beckoning, he wants to speak with him. So Rabbi Nehemiah got up and he went to the side, and his backpacker somewhat shamefacedly told him that I have a flight today to Nepal, to Kathmandu. However, I promised my mother before I got on the plane to the Far East that on Rosh Hashanah I would hear shofar. I know that the rest of the day I'm not going to have the opportunity to hear shofar, and I want to know if you could go ahead and blow the shofar for me right now before davening. So Rabbi Nehemiah was in a bit of a quandary. On the one hand, the Yid is asking to blow shofar because he needs to jump on a plane on Rosh Hashanah. But on the other hand, he understood that to start denying this Yid Shofar would not achieve anything, but just to take away another mitzvah. So he thought for a moment, and he told this backpacker, I have a proposition to make for you. But before I do, I want to tell you that whatever you decide, I will blow shofar for you now. However, it's the first day of the year. And we know Chassidus tells us, the way we begin, as they gate is the ganze Jahr, this is how it goes. So on Rosh Hashanah, the very first day, to go and be Mechal Yom Tov, I suggest that after I blow shofar for you, or perhaps you should decide to stay for the day, and stay for Yom Tov today and tomorrow. And you need to get to Nepal. Don't worry, after Yom Tov, if you take up my offer, I will make sure that you get to Nepal. This backpacker thought for a minute. He was very impressed and taken aback. And he agreed. He told Rabbi Wilhelm, I'm staying. You don't have to blow shofar now. I'll stay for the Yom Tov, as long as you help me after Yom Tov. And Kachava, after Yom Tov, so going to Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Rabbi Wilhelm was very, very busy, and he quickly forgot about this whole episode. Until after Yom Tov, he received, I don't know if it was a letter or an email, but this backpacker wrote to him and says, it's already 4 Shabbos that I'm keeping Shabbos. Every Shabbos I have an urge to be, want to do something to be Mechal Shabbos, but I think to myself, I started the year on the right foot. And if I started the year on the right foot, how could I go now and break what I began so well? We know that in Yiddishkeit there is a very, very strong emphasis on beginnings. Well, obviously standing before Rosh Hashanah, as Chassidus says, that we all know it's not called Tchilas Hashanah, it's not called the beginning of the year, it's called the Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. The same thing we know at the beginning of a month, it's Rosh Chodesh. And even at the beginning of every single day, we know how important it is to begin with Moida Ani Lefanecha, to praise Hashem. Similarly, we find with so many mitzvahs emphasis on the beginning. Last week's Parsha, Bikurim, is one of the big themes of the Parsha. V'lokachta me'yeshis pri artzecha, you bring from the first fruits. When you make challah me'yeshis arisei from the first of your dough, your firstborn children and firstborn animals are given to the Kohen. And there's a very strong emphasis on the beginning. And there are many different explanations for this, but I'm sure many are familiar with the explanation given in Chassidus, and that is that the beginning contains everything which unfolds. We call Rosh Hashanah the head of the year and not the beginning of the year, because just like the head captures everything about the body, so too Rosh Hashanah contains everything about the year. The same thing is with regards to Rosh Chodesh. The same thing the Baal Shem Tov tells us, why it's so important to begin Moed Ani with the right words, because those words encapsulate every other word we're going to say for the rest of the day. The Arizal tells us the reason that we have to respect our oldest brother, the Bechor, is because the Bechor, he encapsulates all the other children that follow. The beginning contains everything which follows, and therefore we have to get it right at the very beginning. With this idea, let us turn to the beginning of the Rambam. So the Rambam begins in the first parak of Hilchis Yesod HaTorah, Yesod HaYesodis. It is the foundation of foundations, V'amud HaChachmas, and the pillar of wisdoms, Leida Sheyesham Matzu Rishon, to know that there is a first being. V'hu Mamtzi Kol Hanimtza, and he brings into existence all other beings. V'chol Hanimtzoim in Shamayim Va'aretz, U'ma Shebeinayim, and anything which exists in heaven and earth, and anything in between, Lo Nimtzeu Ela Me'amitas Himatzo, do not exist but from the truth of the Eibish's existence. Obviously, the first halacha of the Rambam was subject to many explanations of the Rebbe, but in a number of sichos, the Rebbe asks a very simple question, and that is, how can we refer to Hashem as the Matzui Rishon, as the first Matzui, as the first existence? What are we referring to? As the Rebbe Rashab says in Tafresh Samach Vav, in Hemshech Tafresh Samach Vav, that we're talking about the Atzmus Umuhus, the very essence of Hashem. How could you call the very essence of Hashem the first existence? That implies that there's a second existence and a third existence. And when you're talking about the existence of Atzmus Umuhus, how could you say that there is any other existence which you can call the second one or the third one after Hashem. The Rabbi gives a number of different answers, but the one I'd like to focus on, which is relevant to the time of year that we stand, is a Siche in Pasha Shmini and Tavshin and Ches. The Rabbi gives an answer in the Ha'or of the Sicha, and I will try to give it over the Kitzur in a nutshell. And the Rabbi explains the reason we call Atzmuz Umuhus Matzah Rishon, the reason we call it Rishon the first is not so much about the Eibishter, but more about everything else. Of course, as Yidden, we have to understand as much as we can about the essence of the Eibishter, about Elokus. This is one of the mitzvahs we have right at the beginning as well as at the end of the Rambam, Yedias Hashem, to know all about Hashem. But the Rebbe says it's not enough to know about Hashem, but we need to know how everything unfolds from Hashem. The true knowledge of Atzmus Umuhus is that we can look around us at this microphone, the video camera, the friend next to us, the hat, the chair, and everything we see around us and say, this is Atzmus Umuhus. We have to see how everything unfolds and everything is encapsulated. It comes from Atzmus Umuhus. And that's why we refer to Atzmus Umuhus, to the Eibishter, as the Matzah Rishon, because everything which comes is founded on the Eibishter himself. Obviously, as we begin the Rambam, this gives us a chizuk and a koyach. We were standing in the early days of the Rambam, and therefore it's a very, very opportune time for us to be mechazik and strengthen our learning in the Rambam, to make sure that we do it properly, because we know that in the early days, the haskalah contains everything else, and if we devote ourselves properly in the early days, and there's no question, the way we begin, that's the way it will continue throughout the rest of the cycle, throughout the rest of the machzor. And through this we should be zeicha as we stand at the head of the year, Rosh Hashanah with less than a week away. We should all be zeicha to ksiv v'chsima tov l'shana tova masukah, and we should be zeicha to see takeoff miyad mamish with this galus of Melech HaMashiach, how the Eibush is the Matzah Rishon, how everything that we see comes from the first existence from the Eibushter.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Leshes. And now our guest speaker, international speaker, who is here for a simcha, who probably does not need an introduction here in Melbourne, but we'll introduce him anyway. Rabbi Gideon Fox, formerly a Chaver HaKoilel in Melbourne, Rabbi in Doncaster Shul, and now of Pretoria, South Africa. So first of all, we wish you Mazel Tov on the birth of a grandson. And we should see him grow the Torah from Maisim Tovim, and be amongst the Chayalim of the Rebbe who are involved in all of the Inyanim, including Limud HaRambam as well, and to share with us some ideas on Limud HaRambam and paving the way for the Geula, Rabbi Gideon Fox.
It's a well-known cliche, one starts with gratitude to the hosts, and I would like to perhaps do so with a slightly different and hopefully unique expression of gratitude. We've had the privilege of being in Labonus for 23 years, Kanana Hoda. Certainly over the past 13 years, it's fallen upon my shoulders the responsibility of leading the Slichus. Every Motzoi Shabbos of Slichus, I have a recording, a tape recording. For the youngsters here, ask your parents afterwards what that is. A tape recording of the late Rabbi Grono Sholem doing Slichus. When I was a bocher here in Nun Aleph, I put a small recorder listening to his Slichus. I was never able to mimic it, but I was always able to glean the inspiration of those moments. But for 23 years, I've never had the experience and the privilege of a Lubavitcher Slichus. Motzoi Shabbos, circumstance was such that I wasn't at my shul, for good reasons, as you heard. Generally a lot more yekish than this, but I arrived, I think, at 12:21. And I couldn't make it into the shul. The last time that I was Slichus here in Melbourne was Taka by your late father, Rabbi Grono Sholem. Must have been Nun Aleph. I recall an abundance of space. come back after 23 years, to see a community that has burgeoned to such a degree. I stood outside and I was just awestruck. I had a sense, a palpable sense, literally of being in 770. All I saw was a sea of black, the most beautiful color I've seen. To see the growth of this community. Sometimes when one is embedded within it, and one sees a natural growth, it's like with a child, you don't see the tremendous strides that it has taken over the course of its life until you remove yourself from the picture for a bit. I'm not going to say that it wasn't, or it wouldn't have been worthwhile just coming for first grandson's bris. But it certainly would have been worthwhile to come just for that slichus. Please God, the community should go mechayil el chayil. It should continue to be the base Rabbeinu Shebebavel in so many ways. In a place that is very far on the globe. Rabbi Groner Jr., and I always struggled with Rabbi Groner in South Africa, Rabbi Groner here. The Eibusher should bless you and should bench you with many, many years of good health to be able to lead the slichus, and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu should hear your tefillas and should give a slicha v'kafara for those who need it, and the good bench to each and every one of you. And therefore, if I may segue very briefly into a bracha to the community that extends beyond that, and that is, the question is asked, why is it that on Rosh Hashanah we dip the apple in honey? It's a minhag that everybody keeps. It doesn't matter what the supper looks like, but apple and honey everybody does. And I saw a beautiful comment which says like this: when you peel an apple, it naturally goes brown. Instantaneous almost. What do you do if you want to avert, if you want to prevent the apple from becoming discolored? If you want to prevent the apple from what we would consider losing its luster, its beauty, its majesty. So the answer is, if you take after you've peeled it, if you take the honey and you cover the apple with it, the honey remains as beautiful as always. So we give a bracha to Klal Yisrael, and I give a bracha to this wonderful kehillah, to this wonderful community. But just like the apple, in order to maintain its beauty and its majesty and not lose its luster, it needs the honey. The Eibusher should cover each and every one of you, your families, extended families, with the honey and the sweetness of a Shana Tova Mesukah, that through that, the beauty of each and every one of you and your families should be able to continue to go. Mechayil el Chol, you should have a sweet year, a healthy year, a happy year, and continue to give so much joy as the joy that you gave me this past Motzei Shabbos. I was indeed asked to speak about the Rambam. So much has already been said by erstwhile individuals. But perhaps I can share a couple of thoughts and some messages that perhaps we can take home. You know, there's the famous dictum that seems to be very interesting. Mimoshe ad Moshe lo yikom k'Moshe. Somehow or other this became the refrain that has expressed our appreciation of Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, of the Rambam, that equates it Mimoshe ad Moshe. But there's a fascinating thing. It seems to imply that there was a plethora of Moshes in between. You had Moshe Rabbeinu, and then later on in history we had another Moshe, and in between there were so many Moshes. But Mimoshe ad Moshe lo yikom k'Moshe. Says the Chidah, it's fascinating. Now, I'm not an expert in Shas or anything like that by any shape of the imagination. But the Chidah says, have you heard of the Tanur Reb Moshe? Have you heard of the Amoider Reb Moshe? There were only two Moshes at that stage in history. Moshe from Moshe Rabbeinu to Moshe, Loikom to Moshe, there's no other like Moshe. And the Chidah says that is, perhaps in a sense that it's hard. The message of the uniqueness of Moshe Rabbeinu and Rabbeinu Moshe. And I saw an interesting explanation that says that we speak about Moshe Rabbeinu, where Rabbeinu comes after his name, and we speak about Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, when Rabbeinu comes before. And the difference is that Moshe Rabbeinu came before the Torah, therefore Rabbeinu only came afterwards. And Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, so he came after the Torah, and therefore Rabbeinu comes beforehand. Fascinating, nice ideas, but really what does it mean? We're all familiar with the Sikha where the Rebbe explains this concept of everything being and present in the Torah with the Ramban. Asks the question, where's the Rambam in the Torah? Rabbi Ismoif Sai Be'eretz Mitzrayim. The acronym of these four words, Rabbi Ismoif Sai, great are my wonders in the land of Egypt, presents the name of the Rambam. That even in the most darkest of places, the Moifsim of the Eibusha were able to illuminate the darkness and take us out, and to give us a tremendous sense of hope, of aspiration, of yearning and of pining. It's exactly the same thing with regard to the Rambam. Say the Rambam was born in the year Daled Alofim Tov Tov Tzadikei. You have to have a bit of time on your hands. But if you count the Psukim apparently, from the beginning of Chumash and you go 4,895, the year in which the Rambam was born, you reach the Pasuk, Hoyel Moshe Be'edes HaTorah Azizleim. Moshe, the Rambam, was able to explain and expound this Torah, and as the Medrash says, what was the expounding of this Torah that occurred? Over there it's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, it's talking about the Torah Shebaal Peh. And if you will, we have two polars. In Moshe Rabbeinu, obviously giving us the Torah Shebaal Peh, but identified by the Torah Shebechsav, and Moshe ben Maimon, who is identified by specifically the Torah Shebaal Peh. And I wondered to myself, probably because I'm not so well versed, why indeed was it that of all the things that the Rebbe could have been miyasid in order to learn, that we should have a kviyas where there was no ambiguity to it. So Rabbi Johnson has already explained, it wasn't like, there's Mivtzah Tefillin. What's the quota, guys, that we have to do every week? How many tefillin do we have to put on? How many nesheks do we have to get out? There's a mitzvah neshek, mitzvah tefillin. And yet over here, it was so didactic. It wasn't just the concept of learning the Rambam, and whatever you do. It's 3 prakim. If you can't do 3 prakim in 1 perek, if you can't do 1 perek in Sefer HaMitzvot, there's no ambiguity over here. What was the nature of this affinity? In my view, that presented such a requirement to create this as the weapon, as the mechanism with which we will exit Golus and go into Geulah. In many ways, I think it's already been expressed. I mean, who was the Rambam writing for? The Rambam was pilloried. The Rambam was pilloried. His Sfarim were burnt. What kind of arrogance can a man have to say, all you need is this Sefer, you can get rid of everything else. You don't need any other explanations, forget the Gemara, apparently. And whilst no other compilation has ever engendered and spawned so much literature, but who is he writing for? The Amcha. The Talmidei Chachamim, they were not interested by and large, and were very much against the Rambam, as explained. He was writing so that each and every single Yid, man, woman, and child would find v'sein chalkeinu b'seidosecha, would be able to find in an easy language, starting as it did from the writing of the Pirush HaMishnayos in Arabic, so that the people should understand, to a Rambam which, for the less scholarly, is actually quite easy to read. Those who are more scholarly find the nuances, the contradictions. They grapple with the source where the Rambam comes unequivocally with a conclusion, where from? But the rest of us simply take these words in the simple language in which they're written, in the all-encompassing breadth that they are able to span, and we take the words of the Rambam. I think that affinity, that Avas Yisrael, is what it means that we Moshe ad Moshe leikom k'Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu's love of every single Yid is legendary. It's the stuff of Medrashi. And the Rambam made a compilation that expressed his love for each and every single Yid, that each and every single one of us should be able to have, unbelievably, a grasp in some measure of Kol HaTorah Kula, the entire Torah, including, as we heard, Hilchos L'Mashech. A love, a care, and concern. I remember a while ago, Reb Chaim Gutnik was at a Siyum HaRambam. Yeah, it was in Kimberley. He spoke. Some of which, what he said, requires, for those of you who remember, a Reb Chaim Gutnik to express, so I shan't even endeavor. But there was one thought which he expressed, and that was that the Rambam's mission was to bring Mashiach. He associated it with the unparalleled and unrivaled and unequaled lambasting of the David, of the Rambam, in language that is not usually attributed to Talmidei Chacham. And he associated it with the fact that the Rambam's neshama came down here for one purpose and tachas hakavana, in order to bring about Gula Amitis Vashlem, which is why the Rambam was willing to expand his text as broad as it is, but to encapsulate each and every single message, each and every single theme that is going to be relevant not only today but tomorrow as well for Mashiach times. Because the whole Tachlis HaKavana of the Rambam was to bring Mashiach. How do you do that? By having care and concern for each and every single Yid, and I don't need to expand upon it. And at that point in time, Reb Chaim Olav Shalom told the following story. He was a very emotional man, for those of you who didn't know. It's a Shakespearean articulation. He could say nothing and capture everybody's attention for 3 hours, but he never said nothing. And he told the story of how on one occasion he went to the Rebbe for Yechidus. At the end of the Yechidus, the Rebbe turned to the window, the tears coming down his eyes, and he said to Reb Chaim, he said, "Was willen sie von mir? What do they want from me?" It was the time when the Rebbe had come up with the psukim. I mean, you know, it's not as radical as in the eyes of the radicals. Going over to non-frum Yid and asking him to put on tefillin. A child should know Shema Yisrael. And the Rebbe was pilloried. The Rebbe was lambasted. He said the Rebbe was turning towards the window and he had tears coming down. What do they want? All I want is that every single child, even if they go to a public school, should know a few psukim, Ma'amar Chazal. Why do you, what bothers them so much? It's the same theme of care and concern that each and every single year should be able to encapsulate either a portion or the entire gamut of Torah in one way or another. Moshe ad Rabbeinu, until the Rebbe lo come like anybody else, whose entire mission statement shared the same. Moshe Rishon took us out of Mitzrayim, the HaRambam sought to take us out of this Golus, and the Rebbe will take us out of the Golus that we are presently in Siyum. It all comes from care and concern. I heard a story. I heard a story from a Dayan in Johannesburg. It's actually closely related to the Gutniks. And he told this story, and to me it's very profound. The story is profound. His take on the story was profound. But I think the truth is even more profound. It is said like this. Chaim Gutnik Olav Shalom, together with his son, with his brother, Reb Shalom Olav Shalom, grew up apparently at some point in England. Very close to his family. And Reb Chaim went, and he ended up being sent off, and he learned, where was it, in Telz. He learned in Telz. He said that on one occasion, they were walking home from yeshiva, and there was a wedding taking place. Now, it would appear that when you went to Siyum HaRambam in Telz, if you could imagine something like that, they didn't have all the nice pastries and whatever you have at the back. There was no fruit. So Chaim said they were walking home, and there was some chasana going on, and the Bochum went in. There was Sameach Chosan V'Kala, from what I can gather, a little bit, and Chosan Kala was Sameach them a heck of a lot. And they just ate. And Reb Chaim came home and started to have real stomach pains. And he thought that maybe he'd overeaten. They weren't used to this thing called food. In the middle of the night, he can't take it any longer, and they take him to the hospital. The Panovich Rav Kahanim heard that one of the Bochnim was in hospital, so he came to see Reb Chaim. Now Reb Chaim, again, it's talking in part to a new generation. Reb Chaim at that stage did not look like the Reb Chaim that those of us who remembered him. He was a Bocherul, he didn't have a beard. He comes in to see, the Panovich Rav comes to see him, and Reb Chaim is in terrible pain, and he says, well, what the doctor say, asks the Panovich Rav. And Reb Chaim says that the doctor said he needs to have his appendix out. So the Panovich Rav said, no, so have the appendix out. So Reb Chaim says, but I can't. He said, why not? He says, because I have a Rebbe. And I can't do something like this without asking the Rebbe. In those days, then it was the Fidik Rebbe. So the Panovich Rav said to him, I'll tell you what, you can send a telegram and tell them, give them the reply address, give it to me, and I'll come and I'll give you the answer. That was the last time Reb Chaim saw the Panovich Rav. The war happened, we all know the story. Reb Chaim ends up coming here, gets married. He then starts to look for those, if there are any South Africans over here. He becomes a dog and he looks like Paul Kruger. In 1970, I think it was, he made his way to Eretz Yisrael. He was married with a beard, and he wanted to go see the Panovich Rav. So he goes to Bnei Brak. He knocks on the door, the Rebbetzin opens, and he says, "Can I see the Rav?" He says, "Yes," brings him in, and immediately the Panovich Rav turns around and says, "No, did you have the surgery or not?" That was the story that I heard from the Dayan. And he said, wow, look at the memory that the Panovich Rav had. He met this Bacher who looked like nothing that he looks now. So many decades ago, in a tumultuous time, The Panovich Rav had lost his wife and his kids never. He makes his way back to Eretz Yisrael. He rebuilds the Panovich Yeshiva. And a bacher comes in who used to be a bacher, who he had a fleeting moment of time with him. And he says, no. The first thing that he says, did you have the surgery? So the Dayan says, look at the memory. So there's two things I'd like to first of all mention. First of all, Reb Chaim answered and he said yes. So the Panovich Rav said, you see, I told you. To which Reb Chaim answered and he said, I didn't have it then, because the Frierdiker Rebbe said no. But about 20 years later, I needed to have my appendix out, so I had my appendix out. It's not about memory. It's about care. The story does not speak about the genius of memory. It speaks to the genius of care and concern for fellow. And the Rambam's care and concern that each and every single Yid should have his chelek, his capacity to have, to possess, and to own kol ha-Torah kula. By the way, without having to have Safaria on your cell phone. Safaria, whatever it's called. He wanted that you should be able to have kol ha-Torah kula in whatever level. And the Rebbe saw that as the mission statement, as we all know, that in order to bring about the Geula Amitis V'Ashlema, we have to have that care and concern for each and every single individual. And we see it, and with this, I'll conclude, I'm taking up too much time. There's a famous Siyum, Masechta Sukkah that the Rebbe made, that everybody is familiar with doubtless. But the Gemara over there talks about Miriam Bas Bilga, and she comes in and she sees what's happening to Klal Yisrael and to the Mizbeach, and Lukus. She turns and she expresses an idolatrous expression, Lukus. Complaining to the Mizbeach, complaining to the altar of the Eibishter, how long? How long are you going to take Yiddish Geld? And you don't even help them when they need you. I heard once from a Chassidish Rebbe that he explained it like this, and he said, what's the terrible thing? And he said, how does a young woman who grew up in a house of Kohanim come and express herself, Lukus? The language that she heard in the home created such an indelible impression upon her that when everything comes to an end, Lukus, she's able to express heretical statements. Not so the Rebbe's child. And the Rebbe was pilloried for this as well. The Rebbe says, look at the amazing thing. You have over here a woman. She's married out to the Greeks. She comes into the Mokom HaMikdash at a time where they want to bring on the Mizbeach something which even people who eat treif will not eat. And the Rebbe says, and what does she do? She turns to the Eibush and says, where's your Rachmanis for Klal Yisrael? No matter how far a Yid goes, they're never too far that they can't be brought back. They are never outside of the realm. There is an unbelievable, unimpeachable Avas Yisrael for each and every single person. And the Rebbe quotes the Rambam with Yeravam ben Nevat, who divided the Malchus Yisrael into the kingdom into two, who established Slomim, idols that he forced Klal Yisrael to bow down to. And the Rambam says, and I think it's in Igeras Teimon, he says, but I want you to know that ultimately he is going to be held accountable, not just for the fact that he was a Chayto Mahdi. He's going to be held accountable for the fact that he didn't keep Hilchas Eruvin. Hilchas Eruvin Madkar Shmei. This guy has done the worst of the worst. You're worried that he's carrying and he holds by the Eruv? That's the worst thing that he did, because the Eibishter cares about every single Yid, even Yeravim ben Nevat. And even Yeravim ben Nevat, who's gone so far, we still expect everything out of him. because each and every single Yid has within them a core that is unimpeachable, unparalleled, and unbreakable. That's the message of the Rebbe. That's the message of the Rambam. And if I may, that's why the Rebbe felt that through learning Rambam, we'll get rid of the malady of Golus, and we'll bring about the Gula Mitzvah Shlem. Because then we are able to see the core of each and every single Yid, to express, appreciate the power that each and every single Yid has. It's expressed by Moshe Rabbeinu, it's expressed by the Rambam, and it's expressed by Moshe Rabbeinu in the Hadar. So we do a lot, clearly not enough yet, to bring about the Gula Mitzvah Shlem. But what the Rebbe charged each and every one of us is that whether we're learning 3 Krokim, 1 Perek, or Sefer HaMitzvahs, do it, take it on, because this is the continual thread that will bring about the Gula Mitzvah Shlem, take it from Yad Mamish, that already this coming year, Tavshin Ayin Tes, we will all celebrate together in Yerushalayim HaKadosh.
Shemaya, thank you very much, Rabbi Fox. I think that was actually very yekish of you, finishing 9:30 on the dot. Thank you everybody for being mishtatev. I'm sure that the Rebbe has tremendous nachas from our Kehila coming out to support and mechazek the Indian of Limud HaRambam as a takon of the Rebbe. More importantly is the fact that we all go home with extra resolve in our own Limud HaRambam. We should give nachas ruach to the Rebbe. We should be zoiche to Ksiva Chasimatova and to have the fulfillment of the promise and the assurance at the end of the words of the Rambam Mishnah Torah. Kimala Oretz Des Hashem Kamayim Leyom Chassid.